This is the American Family Association and AFA Today.
And we welcome you to the belly of the news beast in Lower Manhattan. We are in the shadow of the Freedom Tower. We are north of the Trinity Church Cemetery. We're directly across the street from the 9/11 Museum and Memorial that now exists. And if you're watching on the AFA channel, you see a very busy Times Square, a very nice day in New York, even though the sun is hidden by some clouds. We've got some great weather in terms of comfortable temperatures out, and people are out and enjoying it. Anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do each day to clarify your thinking, to wrap your thinking around the day's issues with truth, and then respond accurately. And I was last night. I was very honored to be part of a gathering. Several hundred people came together in Brooklyn last night. Talk show hosts from across the country were invited to be part of this. And all we did is we talked about standing with Israel, what it means for the Americans to say to the world that Israel is our most solid ally, and they need us, especially in light of what Ayatollah Khamenei was saying yesterday, that America needs to be wiped off the map, that they're going to pursue nuclear power henceforth, regardless of any international negotiations. Just, again, a reminder, we live in a dangerous world, but I was very honored to be part of that discussion last night. And it continues to enlarge my thinking, because when we're talking about terrorism, when we're talking about how people are being forced to live and to exist in terms of fear of their own well-being, it is not surprising and it is not unusual that you have a lot of, people with bad motives that are trying to get involved in the process of making decisions on our part. And as I did some interviews for some press that were there, the Jerusalem Post, the Jewish Press, and others that were there, one of the things that I kept saying to them is that I'm ashamed of how our government has treated our most important ally, Israel, over the last 6-7 years. I feel like we have kicked them in the teeth at every opportunity, and that it's shameful on us. They came back at me with this follow-up question saying, well, then why do all the prime ministers and the leaders in Israel say that things have never been better with the U.S.? And my question back to them is, what do you expect them to say? In all candidness, they're sitting on a piece of real estate that's a little bit bigger than the state of New Jersey. And they are surrounded by countries. Saudi Arabia is 90 times the size of Israel. Jordan is 4 times the size of it. Egypt is 47 times the size of it. Iraq is 40-something the times of it. You've got these incredible, powerful, large countries that have been trying to push them into the ocean ever since they became a nation. And the truth is, they are the only good thing in the region by way of anything bringing prosperity and better life to the region. And even the Palestinians and Arabs that live in Israel proper, they prefer to live in Israel as to the other areas. Why? Because of the sense of how Israel treats people. There's a very democratic, a very divine-oriented rights view that is very similar, probably more closely akin to the U.S. idea of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution than any other country in existence. And so, the protection of religious liberty is important to them, but they also don't put up with terrorism. And that's relevant because today's top headline is President Obama speaks to the West Point cadets at their graduation commencement today. And he says this. He says, he announces his new policy, one in which he describes that the U.S. military will no longer engage in, quote, military adventures. He describes his new foreign policy and his new direction of what will guide him on foreign policy around collective action and the word restraint, deploying unilateral U.S. military force only when the American people are threatened. Kind of like saying he's going to draw the troops down by an exact date in Afghanistan a couple of days ago. To me, it seems rather worrisome that you have the President of the United States announcing that we're going to become more impotent in terms of who we are. And I'm not advocating that we take military action at the drop of a hat. What I'm strongly encouraging the President to do is to allow the world to be afraid of the might of the American military. Let me explain why. When America is militarily strong, when we have the ability to respond to terrorism or to incidents or to bad behavior in other parts of the world quickly, when we have the reach that we need to effect relief on major natural disasters and other things that come about, when America's military might is strong, the world is safer. And if you would like to see a historical bit of anecdotal proof of what I'm saying and where we're at and where we're going, History Channel, the last two nights, have been putting on this 3-part documentary, and it's a fantastic documentary called The World Wars. And they really are looking at the period of 1914 through 1945 as kind of one historical season in American history. Not two separate wars, but one kind of concurrent development that gave rise to all of the following people: MacArthur, Patton, Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Roosevelt, Churchill. All of them came of age and became who they eventually were known to be in history during that 30-year period, that 31-year period. All of those guys served on the front lines, except Roosevelt. He was in the administration. But all of those guys served in the front lines on some capacity and some level in the First World War. And then they all became leaders and shapers of history in the Second World War for very specific reasons. But what happened significantly between World War I and World War II? President Roosevelt, obviously the Great Depression was happening, and President Roosevelt thought that the New Deal was the answer to the nation's problems, and he put people to work doing things like building the Hoover Dam and a number of other things. But the way he paid for it was to radically slash the U.S. military expenditure, to basically make smaller the size of the American military force. And when the time came that there was a necessary response needed in the Pacific before Pearl Harbor, when Japan had its sights set on the Philippines, which was an American protectorate, it still is, when that was the case, we only had, for that one thing, the Japanese were ready to send 1 million people. We had 22,000. When Hitler watched as the Great Depression gave way to these new ideas and spending and focuses in not only the United States, but also in Great Britain, he ramped up his military production. He ramped up the size of the German military, built around the Nazi propaganda and ideals, while we were drawing down. And as he began to take country after country and territory after territory, there was this continual idea that nobody could stop him. We had to rebuild the American military before we could win World War II. And without it, we wouldn't have. Fast forward to this year. We are slashing the military budget. We are cutting military jobs. We are doing away with positions for people in the military. We are drastically cutting back on weapons production and other things that would give us an advantage in the event that something happens, something breaks out. And simultaneously, we are watching our State Department ruin nation after nation's situation. John Kerry's been a disaster in Syria and in the Ukraine and in place after place. Friends, it is really, really vital. It is really vital. Not that we respond to every need that comes across the radar screen, but it is really vital, in my opinion, that we keep the American military strong. When American military is strong, when we are feared, when the might of the American military is feared, the world is safer. And when we are not feared, the world becomes more dangerous. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Obviously, the president disagrees because he thinks we need to shrink the size of the military, and that's what he's intending to do. All right, so we've got some interesting things yet to get to that I want you to stay with us for. There's also one other sort of military angle to this that I'd love to talk about and get your feelings on. Because when I saw this before the president's speech this morning, I knew that we had to talk about this. If there is any group of people in America that Kevin McCullough personally believes we should be doing everything we can to take care of, it is our veterans. Our veterans have sacrificed. They have put their lives on the line. Some of them have lost significant portions of their body, of their mind, of their emotional health, of their mental health. Because of the sacrifices they were willing to make, that has been the price that many of them have paid. With this scandal that has hit the Veterans Administration and the waiting list programs where people were systematically slowed down in getting treatment, and what we believe now, at least from the Veterans Administration's admission, that maybe 20 or so deaths have been caused because of these delays that were preventable. What we find out today makes it even less excusable, because this morning it was announced that the Obama administration's Department of Veterans Affairs expects to have money carried over from the 2014 to the 2015 fiscal year. Now, I want to make sure we understand what I'm talking about here. The VA healthcare model has been often lifted up by the liberals in particular as the gold standard for how we should implement socialized medicine across the United States. That, we take care of the veterans, and because we've taken care of the veterans, there's no reason why we can't take care of all of the citizens simultaneously. This has been an argument. This is one of the arguments that the president made in advocating for the health care law that he advocated on the campaign trail both times. There's been this idea that if we can take care of our veterans, then we can take care of everyone else. Then this scandal comes about, ironically enough, the year we're implementing most of Obamacare. And this scandal comes about from the perspective, from the situation where we are implementing veterans, healthcare benefits. We find out that people have been systematically delayed. There's been a waiting list. People have died waiting for simple treatments, simple opportunities to see doctors, to get diagnosed, etc. Oh, and by the way, their $450 million that they're going to carry over from this year into next year, and this is the fifth year in a row in which multiple hundreds of millions of dollars have been carried over. Now, friend, I know that money doesn't fix everything. I understand that. But you can't convince me that Veterans Affairs not using tens of hundreds of millions of dollars doesn't have some impact on the efficiency with which the number of doctors are necessary to see the number of veterans that are needing it. Why not hiring more doctors? Why not building a few more facilities? Why not easing the flow in some places so that in other places it moves more quickly? Your thoughts on both of these subjects as we go through the day today. 888-589-8840. It's Kevin McCullough coming to you from New York. Always glad to have you with us. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. I'm Kevin McCullough. This is AFA Today on AFR Talk.